Greetings YouTube, Crad here. In this video I'm going to talk to you about the Begg knives version of the Boker Field Marshal. So this is a knife made in China by the Boker Plus line. Based on a Todd Begg design called the Field Marshal. When the Boker Field Marshal was released, the Begg Knives team wasn't quite pleased with some of the specifics of how it turned out. So they either bought a few or acquired them through some means, brought them into their shop, and did a little bit of hand tuning to the knife. There are other videos out there on the straight up Boker version, but none on the Begg retuned version, so I figured it'd be worthwhile to show that to you. So it still features the same extremely thick G10 scales with this little, like somebody came through with a melon baller and scooped the G10 out. Sort of a little steel or aluminum piece around the pivot that sort of looks like a cartoon version of the piece that's on the actual bodega. The Begg Knives team added IKBS to this knife. There are reports that the Boker version didn't flip very well and it just rode on washers. So they took the washers out, milled out channels, and added ball bearings to the IKBS standards. They retuned the lock. Having not owned the Boker version, I can't comment on what the lock was like before. And they also retuned the clip. So I'm guessing maybe they just sort of bent it into a better shape. Maybe it wasn't very ergonomic, or maybe it didn't clip very well. And then they gave the clip and the liners their jewel icing, which, if you've seen the show Begg Brothers, is essentially them sort of lightly bouncing a Dremel off of the material, which gives it a really neat look. Sure, it takes a while to do, and to do it where it still has a nice smooth to the touch texture, not jagged or any sharp points. But it just sort of gives it that nice appearance. Being that it has IKBS, the blade lines up pretty well, and it flies open very well. I'd imagine that if there was any sort of slop to the detent, they also would have addressed that issue. Indeed, this example in front of me has no detent issues whatsoever. The detent and smoothness of the blade deployment is quite perfect, as you would expect coming from the Begg knife shop. Now, the Boker version of this knife can be had through various sources for around the $80 mark, probably somewhere between $80 and $90. To get it through Begg Knives is a pretty substantial markup. I actually got mine through the secondary market at a much more reasonable price. The Begg Knives crew does impeccable work, and if they weren't taking the time out of their busy schedules, making bodegas and field grades and friction glimpses and all of the other wonderful toys that they bring us, then they would have been working on projects where the higher price expenditure makes a little bit more sense. So by them working on this, you can understand where their price increase over the Boker version comes into play, just given the time that they put into this, and sort of the essential value of their time, because if they spent that time elsewhere, they would be putting it into a higher priced project. However, coming in at $300, I don't know if I could recommend this to many people. If you can get it on the secondary market at a lower price than that, I would definitely recommend it. It is a very heavy knife, Very chunky knife. It feels a lot heavier in hand for some reason than it seems like it should. And I don't know exactly what that effect is. Somehow it weighs about the same as my Bodega, but the Bodega doesn't feel as heavy. I don't really know how to explain that. Definitely the steel liners of this knife, the added weight that they bring is definitely felt. Talk a little bit about the blade. It has a satin finish, as you can see. It is 440C, which isn't a very premium steel. It is kind of the steel that Boker loves to use. And if you want one of the many different Boker collaborations, they have a lot of great collabs out there, like the Burnley Quaken. They have a collab with Salmonero, with Tom Crane. They have a lot of really great knives out there, and most of us in the knife community really wish that they would start upping their steel game to be a little bit more competitive in that aspect, especially considering some of the collaborations that they have that a lot of us would like to own. But every time that I think about buying a Boker collaboration knife, I always, have that in my head. Well, it's only 440C, 440C might get a bad rap. From what I understand, it is a very good steel. The edge retention isn't what it is for a lot of the new super steels that we all obsess over. But there was a time where it was sort of the industry standard, and the quality of the steel hasn't decreased since the time that it was the industry standard. It's just we've been exposed to a lot higher wearing steels since then. Another thing about this knife is that the clip only comes in one position, which is a tip down carry, and I myself am not a fan of tip down carry. It's not a big deal, but I'll point out that inside of these long holes here, the material is very rough. Here you can even see that there's a little piece of metal that wasn't knocked away in the manufacturing process. Overall, if you love Begg knives, you want a Field Marshal, but there's no way you're going to get a custom, I would look at this. Otherwise, I would probably pass. Thank you for watching.